And we'll go 3, 2, 1. Hello, all you lovely people out there trying to make the world a better place. Welcome to the Dead Man Walking podcast. I am your host, Repeatedly Dead Fred, author of the soon to be released medical trauma memoir, The Summer I Died 20 Times, because that's what happened to me, and thus the name Repeatedly Dead Fred. Today, I'm here with Kitt O'Malley, who is going to talk about both some mental health challenges and a book she's written, and her special guest. So, Kitt, welcome to the show. Happy to have you on.
It's great to be here. My special guest, I don't know if I can get him in front of the camera, but you might hear him if somebody comes to the door, and he's Coco, the standard poodle. Not an emotional support dog, but he's pretty sweet. He's a sweetheart. He's they call poodles Velcro dogs. It called follow you all around.
Well, Coco, welcome.
It might be in the background. So so I'm Kitt O'Malley, and I wrote a book called Balancing Act: Writing Through a Bipolar Life. And basically it grew from my blog. Back in 2013, my father-in-law suffered, let me see, what was it first? I think it was started with a sepsis. And then he had a stroke. So he had, and my husband and his siblings all went up to be with him. He was in Canada at the time on vacation. Yeah. Just up, I guess, north of Montana, I think. Or maybe, I don't know what exactly it was. I don't remember, but definitely on the, western side. And that triggered hypomania in me, just the crisis and having my husband gone and the worry, because all of a sudden I realized all of our parents were at this age where they might die, because he was put into a medically induced coma, and there were the first 48 hours are like, let's pray that he lives, because he might die. And so what I did with that hypomania is I started blogging online, and I became involved in a mental health community online of lots of bloggers who blog about mental health, and that was incredibly supportive and interactive. And what happened was, over time, I realized, I have content here that I could repurpose into a book. And so the first time I repurposed it, I just basically published the blog posts. I took out blog posts that were more, because not everything was first person. So there was stuff that was more informative. And so I took out the things that were informative, except, I have appendix now. I have appendices that have resources and stuff. But then I thought, what, this is kind of lame. It's just not very well organized.
Yeah, no authors ever.
Yeah. So I went and I had a friend, I worked with a friend's developmental editor, and we organized the content into 3 different areas, and that was by posts that were about bipolar disorder, posts that were about my mental health advocacy, and posts that were about caretaking, because I caretook my son's now an adult, but a high needs child who had ADHD, anxiety, depression, and severe gastrointestinal migraines. So in addition to having my own mental health issues with bipolar disorder, I had to take care of him. And then when both of my parents had dementia. My father first alcohol related dementia, and then my mom, and then mom got a stroke. And we considered moving in with them and taking care of them. And my sister's like, no, that's not going to be good for you. Having both parents with dementia and you have bipolar, that's just too much. And then my son already high needs. So my sister and I decided to have them put in a memory care close to my home because she lived out of state. I was living in California at the time where my parents lived, Southern California. And so, we had them moved close to me so I could visit them regularly. And so I was their, basically caretaker in that. I was the one who visited. I was the one who made the day-to-day, decisions. My sister would help with all the big decisions and was there as support and would visit. But I took on the day-to-day stuff, which was still a lot. So even with having them cared for by a great,
I think most people know what bipolar is. Could you give us a little description, like maybe some of what the condition is, or some of the major symptoms that people would see with someone with bipolar?
Sure, I will. That's a great question. Well, one of the interesting things that I'll say, just to complicate things before I make it simple,
of course,
is that they're starting to think that bipolar disorder is actually part of a spectrum disorder that includes schizophrenia, because there are diagnoses that schizophrenia, schizoaffective, and bipolar, and they're starting to think that maybe they're all part of a spectrum disorder. So bipolar itself, that's just sort of being posited right now. That's just being, but bipolar itself describes what used to be called manic depression. And manic depression actually is pretty descriptive. It's actually, I think it's a better describer of, because it says what it is. So what you do is you have, if you have bipolar 1, which is the traditional, the more severe bipolar disorder, which I have, you can have manic episodes, and manic episodes can include behavior that, or can include racing thoughts. That can be hypomania too, which is like mania light. Racing thoughts, spending a lot of money, feelings of euphoria or religiosity, like maybe even thinking that you're God. Promiscuous behavior, not always, but it can. Sleeplessness. Like I had a manic episode. To be descriptive, I'll give you one manic. It can vary person to person, but I was prescribed medication, antidepressants, when I was 30 that precipitated a manic episode. I wasn't diagnosed bipolar at that time. They thought it was just the medication, but I'll describe the manic episode. So for a full week, I didn't sleep. I was thinking simultaneously, streaming thoughts about binary code, that's ones and zeros, were just streaming through my head. Roman Catholic Christian saints, mystic saints, information about mystic saints, and information about chaos theory. So it was just streaming through my head, and I was unable to sleep because of these streaming thoughts.
Okay, I have a question about that.
Okay, you bet.
Okay, so are you a coder?
No.
Okay.
But I am very geeky. I'm very geeky. So
are you a Roman Catholic?
I was baptized, and I actually had been to a retreat about the Catholic mystic saints. I'd been to a Catholic retreat, so I was familiar with that content.
And were you a physicist at some point?
No.
No. So how I'm trying to wrap my head around how you would have these streaming thoughts about things you know nothing about.
I know, it was fascinating. You could wonder. I mean, I was curious at the time because I was able to pull myself back and observe it. And I was like, wow. I mean, I knew because I had quit being a psychotherapist because I was in a crisis, but I had been a psychotherapist at this point. So I knew I was psychotic. And I was able to separate myself from it and observe it. and think, wow, this is fascinating. I wonder if this makes any sense. But I was geeky. I'd been somebody who had taken physics, but not, I wasn't familiar. I'd never studied chaos theory. There are people who believe that chaos theory and is that I always believed, ever since I took trig in high school, that there was something, some truth or mystical truth or religious truth to math, and I don't know what it is. It could have just been the circle and the triangle had something to do with my mind's not winning the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, three in one. So the Trinity. So I could have just been as simple as that I thought it was a metaphor for the Trinity. So, but those symbols are used a lot, even preceding Christianity. So I was familiar with things on a superficial basis.
Okay.
So it was something that there were topics that I was interested in, but I was not a physicist. I was a math geek in college, but I wasn't. I started out a biochem major and then ended up a legal studies major. So there were things I was interested in, but not that I was an expert in. And I wasn't, basically ones and zeros don't make sense unless you're a computer. Okay. Because it's just on, off, on, off, on, off, on, off. It's like, people don't write code. It's just computers work. So, but I did wonder, wow, if I could record this, I wonder if there was a way that I could record this content. I wonder if it makes sense, but that was an example of my manic episode. And you could even think of it as channeling something. I don't know, but it was definitely also, I think that there was some truth there in terms of the content, but it wasn't something that I could cope with. It interfered with my basic functioning. And in fact, at that time, my friend called my priest. I was going to an Episcopal church. I was an Episcopalian, actually, at that point, Catholic light, and called my father and had them come over. And my father flew up. I was living in the Bay Area. The priest came over with a bipolar seminarian to be with me. I called the psychiatrist, got on antipsychotics for 3 days to put a stop to that episode. So those are examples, but with other people, it might be that they go into bankruptcy, they spend all of their money, they go on trips that are beyond their, they just behave in ways that are not typical of them when they are not in a manic episode. Okay.
So it sounds like extreme unfiltered behavior.
Yes. Right. So, and it's very high. It's like, and then hypomania is like a lesser, a milder that. So you might feel feelings of euphoria or racing thoughts, but it's not as extreme. And like when I'm hypomanic, I can be irritable and short-tempered, and things, noises can irritate me. People chewing can irritate me. Like, I'm very sensitive and irritable and have trouble sleeping because of the thoughts streaming through my head. And then depression, most people are familiar with what depression is. So depression isn't just, so when you go up on those highs, then you go down low.
Yeah.
And the low is not just sadness. It lasts longer than 2 weeks or longer. And it can involve, when I was 18, I was suicidal. And then when I was, and I dealt with, so I went to cognitive behavioral therapy at that time to help me rewrite those thoughts, stop them, rewrite them from an irrational thought. I thought I was like, my family, I thought my family would be better off without me. I thought the world would be better off without me. It was just horrible thoughts. And I finally, at one point, had got together a plan and the means, and I wrote a suicide note and the whole thing. I was like, oh my goodness, I'm actually going to do it. It's not just a thought. I'm actually getting ready to do this. And that's when I got the help, and a friend came. I called a friend to be with me. I went to the resident assistant and got in to see a psychologist to help me out.
Awesome. So many questions.
Okay, go ahead. Shoot.
So it would seem that, it's the contrast between being so up there and being so down that would be very problematic for somebody trying to rebalance themselves.
Yes.
And that, just your body would be in so much trauma, whether you're actually aware of what your body's doing or not. Just your body trying to rebalance, that's got to be so energy consuming.
Exactly.
And then does science have an idea if this is like a gene issue, or is this an environment issue, or some combination of both?
It's currently considered, and I'm not an expert, so just this is my understanding. My understanding is that it's basically you have a genetic propensity, but whether it is turned on or off can have to do with your environment. So that you can have environmental triggers or things that make it more likely to express itself, that are environmental. So that it is not caused environmentally, but it's sort of triggered environmentally, or that's so it's both. I guess I would say.
Have you identified any potential triggers for yourself?
Well, I have triggers in terms of episodes, right? Like if I get too much sun or too much stimulation, too much social stimulation, I will trigger hypomania. If I get too little sun, too little stimulation, stuff like that, I will become depressed. So I'm actually very seasonally affected. And my medication often has to be changed based upon whether it's the summer or the winter.
So do using sad lights or maybe going to a tanning bed, are those possible good things for you?
Well, tanning beds are not good because I have the wrong kind of UV lights. But yes, in the winter, I actually have one of those. I haven't used it, but I have one of those in case I need it. So yeah.
I have a sad light.
Right. Yes, sad lights can be helpful, but you definitely want to not overdo it because that can then trigger the other side. Yes.
Wild. Just wild. So I know that sounds like I'm finding this interesting, and I am, but hopefully in a respectful way.
Oh no, yes, totally. And I'm very open, and you're very respectful. You're not like throwing shade or being, calling me crazy or anything like that. So yeah, no, I'm very open about it. And I'm open to questions and curiosity and stuff like that. Definitely. Often people, I'm actually even though I'm on disability, because working actually is one of my triggers, because I try to please. When I worked, I was a workaholic. I worked crazy hours. I know people aren't. I don't mean that in like mentally ill hours, but
I sense a stand-up routine coming out of this.
Mentally ill. I don't mean, but I would work until like 2 a.m. And it just was, not good for me. So now, and in fact, even now, I have to make sure that I don't overdo it, because I'm like a dog with a bone when I'm doing something. And so, and I spend a lot of time on social media, doing as a mental health advocate as an individual, and I volunteer for my local U.S. National Alliance on Mental Illness for Central Oregon. And when I lived in Southern California, I volunteered for their Orange County. I lived in Orange County, California, where Disneyland is. So, and I volunteered there too.
Okay, so at what point did Coco the Wonder Poodle convince you to start writing a book?
Okay. Well, I started okay, so we got back at 213 and I spent years of blogging. And so I put out this book that's just the blog posts, and then I decided to rewrite it. So it's just sort of as the process that I was writing, I was wondering, am I writing a book? So because this, so basically the book, I then went and wrote along with the help of a developmental editor. I wrote, like an introduction that's sort of my mental health journey. It sort of went through a little bit of a narrative. And then in front of each section, like the section about the posts about bipolar disorder, I wrote, information about that in general, and information about caretaking in general, and information about mental health advocacy in general. And I know we use advocacy different in the United States as they do in Canada. In Canada, they mean legal advocacy, and in the United States, we mean both.
Okay.
Both legal advocacy and just, anything pro, you know what I mean? Any kind of activism, whether it be legal or just social. So just sharing your story, we consider an active advocacy because it's making a difference in the world. So that's when that was, I don't remember the year I first published it, but the year that I published the second edition was 2019. And then unfortunately my friend's business, she published it, went under. And so I self-published it in 2020 at the beginning in January. And unfortunately, my mom died that month. And then we had the pandemic. So I kind of just didn't, during the pandemic, I was very cocooned. I didn't do as much. I wasn't as active as I was online or anything like that as I was before.
For sure.
Because it was just all about the family and me. So
do you think because of your condition, you are possibly more immunocompromised than most people?
that's interesting. I don't know. I know there's such a thing that's been identified by SUNY New York. I forget this. It's a university in New York, university system, and it's called Alpin, and it's a genetic spectrum disorder that they identified that involves the areas the A is for anxiety, the L is for laxity, the M, Alpin, the P is for pain, the I is for immune, and the M is for mood. And clinicians have noticed these overlapping circles that people with some of these disorders overlap a lot. Like I have immune disorders in that I have allergies and asthma. In fact, I have my inhaler here. That's what I went to go get early on. But I couldn't really answer that question specifically because I don't know that I have Alpin, but it is interesting that that it's not just a brain disorder, it's a brain body type thing. So, but I don't, I think different people have different, I just tend to get, because of my asthma, I tend to get more upper respiratory stuff. I know my son and husband, who are more on the anxiety side, tend to do more stomach stuff.
Well, I know from my work with intermittent fasting and my own work with intermittent fasting, my asthma and my allergies have completely disappeared, except for my allergies to cats. Because one of the benefits of intermittent fasting is it reduces your overall body inflammation and it allows your immune system to reset. So for those of you who don't know intermittent fasting, you can pick up my friend Jen Stevens' book, Fast, Feast, Repeat, and she talks a lot about it, but mostly she describes it as the health plan with a side benefit of weight loss. So when most doctors propose intermittent fasting to patients, it's more about the weight loss, but the health benefits of it are just mind-blowing.
That's interesting. I mean, I do know that there is an inflammatory aspect to mental illness, and there's also a gut microbiome,
For sure.
biome, the gut aspect to it too. So, and they're just learning a lot about that, so that's interesting. Yeah. So,
Mhm.
well, intermittent fasting would affect the gut biome, so it might be helping with that part.
Oh, for sure. It helps rebalance the good bacteria versus the bad bacteria
Right.
and
Right.
get rid
Exactly.
of the anyhow.
Yeah, that's
Another
interesting.
conversation.
Yeah, fascinating. Yeah, I'll have to check that out.
So um, I'm wondering if people want to get your book or maybe talk to you or have you do a Zoom event or a speaking event for them. Is there any possible way they could get in touch with you?
Yes, there is. I have a
Okay.
website, Kitt, Kitt, O'Malley, OMALLEY.com. I have all my social media links and there's a little envelope link for sending an email to me.
Mhm.
And so I respond to social media comments. So unless it's like, hey, do you want to promote me on your whatever, except for solicitations for
Mhm.
promotions. So I will respond. And my book is for sale on Amazon, and I've noticed it's other places too, but I only get paid. The only place that's ever paid me is Amazon. So I don't know what's
Okay.
going on with the other places.
Okay. So I wonder if other people have copied your book. Like that happened to my friend Jin. Um, and Amazon is knows it's a problem and has you know, they try to help with it, but as big as they are, they have limits to their resources. But
Hmm.
they'll basically they republished Jin's book, and instead of calling it by Jin Stevens, they called it by Stephen Jin.
Wow. No, I
So
have it with me as the author, but I don't know who's getting the royalties. Do you know what I
mhm,
mean? Other place, well, first of all, you go on Amazon, there's other bookstores, so they could be selling the hard, not the hardback, the paperback,
mhm.
but also it's on Barnes and Noble, and I have not received any money from Barnes and Noble. So,
Oh, those scoundrels.
no, I don't know if they're scoundrels. I just don't know if it's set up properly. Just
Okay.
it could still be going to the former publisher, because
Mhm.
it was published by somebody else first. I just haven't taken the time to figure all that out.
Sure. Okay. So this is the least favorite part of the podcast for me because we're running out of time according to Zoom. So um, I want to spin the author's wheel with you. Is that okay?
Okay, you bet.
Okay. So can you give me a number between 1 and 35?
6.
6. If I made you a perfect sandwich, or what you deem the perfect sandwich, what ingredients should I include?
Oh, that's easy.
Mhm.
Sourdough toast, and
Okay.
then bacon, lettuce, tomato, and avocado with mayonnaise. I
That sounds
mean,
very healthy. Well, most of it is, you know.
most of it, maybe not the bacon, but it depends on how much bacon, and it depends how you
Mhm.
make it. My mom used to make it, like my sister and I used to love our mom's BLTs, and
Mhm.
we went and watched her make it once, and she put like a quarter cup of in each one. She put like, well, first you put mayonnaise on this, and then you put the lettuce, and then you put a little dot with mayonnaise, and then you put the tomatoes, then you dot with mayonnaise, then you put the this, and then you dot with mayonnaise. She's like, that's what makes it juicy. We're like, oh my god, mom, you put like a quarter cup of mayonnaise. No wonder we love your BLTs.
Mhm. And I think in the old days, or like 30, 40 years ago, um, the bacons and the mayonnaise, didn't have all the preservatives and stuff. They weren't as bad as they are now. So it probably was somewhat healthy, you know. I mean, you're here, so couldn't have been that
No,
bad.
yeah, right. But yeah.
Okay. So Kit O'Malley, and I have to say, you sound like your name should have been a gunfighter in the West.
Oh, with Kitt. Yeah, Kit
Yeah.
Carson.
Yeah. So I want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story and telling us about your book, which is available at Amazon. Don't buy it at Barnes and Noble because she's
No,
not
you
getting a
can
commission.
no, you can buy it at Barnes and Noble. You can buy it wherever you can find it. I just need to go and figure out why I'm not getting royalties from those places.
Okay. Thank you so much. And thank you
Okay.
to Coco the Wonder Dog, wherever
Yes,
he is right
he
now.
is. Yeah, he's being quiet now.
And so thank you all for tuning in to the Dead Man Walking podcast. And as the cool kids say, smash that like button or notification button or share or subscribe or whatever it is you guys do. Share with other people, help Kitt promote her book, buy yourself a copy, buy it as a gift. It looks great on a kitchen, on a, oh my God, a coffee table.
Oh, it
Anything
does.
like
It's
that.
beautiful. It has a beautiful cover designed by Michelle Hammer of Hammer
Mhm.
Time Design. She lives with schizophrenia. She's an awesome advocate and just designer.
Hammer time.
Hammer Time.
Yes.
Hammer Timer's
So
design.
thank you all. And I hope to catch you next podcast. Thank you so much. Have a great
Okay,
day.
thanks. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye, Kitt.
Okay, bye-bye. It was great meeting